It's being recorded. And then you can cd into it, so move into the directory it's in. Then we'll set up on Heroku. So if you type in the same directory, just Heroku login, it should give you a login. It should open up a login link once you press any button. So I'm not going to do it now because I've already done it. But if this takes a while, just wait. It just it just needs to boot up for a bit. And once you've logged in, you can type Heroku create in the same command line. Then it'll create a project on Heroku for you. So I have mine here already. They should also just take a few seconds. And once you have that, if I'm going too fast, just type in the chat and I can slow down because I can't see the chat right now. So if Sarah, if anyone's asking anything. So once you have the project, you want to type npm install in the same directory as your project. And that'll just install all the dependencies that you need. This shouldn't take too long because it's a small project. And once you have that, you can view your project on your browser. So if I type Heroku local web, it'll start running locally on port 5000. So now if I go to localhost at port 5000, I can see my project. So just refresh. And yeah, that's the base that we have here. That's already built in. So on next, we want to set it up on Heroku. This part we'll do later, so we don't have to do it now.
So let's just pause for a little bit here and see if anyone didn't manage to. So you all have the link to this same page where we're showing you right now on the screen. So if anyone didn't manage to see these steps or go through the steps as we were talking, let us know if we need maybe 5 more minutes or if we just want to go through them once again.
Yeah, just let us know in the chat, and I can go back to any step or run it through again. Just weird I can't see the chat, but let's see if I can figure that out.
Yeah, no one is asking anything in the chat right now, so I'm assuming that everyone managed to go through it. But if you didn't, please send us a message so we just know, can we move forward or should we pause on this bit a little bit?
Yeah, and if you're keeping up, then yeah, send a message as well, just so we know that most people have finished.
All right, so it sounds like everyone is good because no one is asking questions. So I think we can start and move on with the theory part then. And if you guys didn't manage to go through any of these steps here, take your time during the theory part because you all do have the link to this. So really make sure that you have this running locally before we can then start into the next part. So then I can share my screen again here. Just give me a moment. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yep.
So again, a little bit of the vocabulary, just to kind of give you an introduction about some of the things you just saw. and some more things that you're going to see on the second part of the practical workshop. So what is even a web application? And I know that you guys, some of you have different levels of experiences. Some of you maybe worked more with the back end. Some of you worked more with the front end. So for some of you, these parts we're going to talk about are going to be super familiar, but there are some people who maybe, you know, aren't super familiar with them. So yeah, we're going to try and tailor it to the front end part. So what is even a web application? So how it works is you have essentially a client and a server, and client is the one who's sending a request to the server. Server is then processing that request, going to the database, fetching the data, and sending back a response. So let's say I open Google Chrome and I type in cute cats. So I Google search for cute cats. So whenever I click on either a link that showed up or I go to a direct URL in the URL field, when I do that, I'm making a request. So based on the URL, my server is going to understand what exactly am I requesting, and then it's going to return me a response after it finds it. So when you're surfing the internet, the response is interpreted via browser, and that browser understands HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and that's why it can display it as a web page. So URL is essentially the web address of an online source. So web address of a website or of a document. So what does it consist of? It consists of the protocol. Sorry, just my connection broke. So it consists of the protocol. In this case, we have HTTPS, and the protocol basically declares how your web browser should communicate with a web server. Then it also has a server name. So in this case, it's wordpanda.com. So that maps to the IP address of your server. That's what tells you this is the server I want to go to. And then inside of that server, where do I go inside of that server? That's determined by the further URL path. So in this case, this is the whole kind of second part, traveling fan cat slash blah, blah, blah. So when you talk about client-server architecture, I suppose a lot of you have heard about client-server, but maybe are not entirely sure what it means or how does it entirely work. So server is the one that serves the information. So it serves your application, for example. And client is every device which is requesting that information. So client is your laptop, your architecture. So server is the one that serves the information, and then client is every device pretty much which is requesting that information. So either your laptop or your mobile phone. So anything where you open your web browser and you go to this URL and you try to load this web application. So that is a client. So the server has a job to constantly listen for incoming connections pretty much and accept those connections, parse requests, and then send back the responses to the client. So when we talk about environments as well, you've pretty much heard somewhere that there is something like a local QA and production environment, but if you haven't really worked in a company, then you hardly experienced using all of those. So a context about what is a production environment and why do we have local and QA. So applications can be served in different environments, and what's the difference between them is they have different configuration. They have different types of users accessing them, and they're used for different purposes. So pages which you visit every day, they're all on production environment. They're all out there live. They're all ready for traffic. They should be properly secure. They should be stable version of the applications, not a buggy beta version or something. But because delivering software isn't really an easy task, you don't just write code and immediately put it to production. That's why we usually in our day-to-day job use QA, which is a short for quality assurance, which is where we test application before we put it to production. And we also use local environment, which is the one to simply run your application on your own computer as you develop stuff. So today, what we are going to be using as you develop your application is a local environment, really. So for the workshop today, we will be developing locally in your computers, and that essentially means we will be visiting localhost to check your progress. So if you remember what we were showing you earlier, it was something like localhost, which was a part of URL. So this is where you want to go and essentially see your application in a browser. So what is Heroku then? Heroku is a cloud platform where you can publish your application. So you can configure your app to be deployed and served on their servers. So in this case, Heroku serves us essentially as a server in that client server story. So Heroku supports different programming languages, and yeah, that's what we're going to be using as a server today. So if you look back at the page we requested earlier, you're going to see that it has different elements which are going to be always the same, even if you go to a different article in the same page, in the same application. Whichever article you go to, it's always going to have the same header, the same menu, the same login button, like button. So these parts are essentially the core of the UI. And then it also has the content. Content is the one that changes depending on which article you go to. So pretty much if we talk about the front and back end split here, we are saying that front end is the one that has UI interface. So front end is client side. It is running in the browser and it's using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in order to display your web page. Backend is the server side. So that's running on one or more servers. In this case, once we deploy it to Heroku. If you're in a local environment, then your own computer is acting as a server there. And backend has data, which is stored in the database. So if you look at this web page again, frontend is responsible for creating this menu, for creating the header, for creating the buttons like login, like button. And it's responsible for making this look pretty as well, and the structure which this is displayed in. Backend is responsible for the content, for the article title here, and for the image that you see. So backend is the one which has this data stored in the database, and then you just fetch it and manipulate it on the front end. So good thing to know is that today what we're actually focused on is front end. So we're gonna try and give you a super short intro of the backend in 2 slides, just so that you have a clear picture of what your backend is, what are the main parts there. But we aren't gonna be using the database. There is also additional part of the project which is using the database, which we can link to you, and you can then use it. You can then go through that part of the project later on in your free time. That would be fantastic. So that one is a bit more backend oriented, and it uses Firebase as a database. But for today, we're only focused on the front end part. So backend on 2 slides, essentially. The most important pieces you should know about here are essentially your data, which is stored in the database. And think of a database like, a set of data tables, essentially. And your APIs. APIs are responsible for fetching the data. So API, think of it as a contract, or almost as an interface of how do you get to server and how do you fetch that data from a database. So in order for the API to send something via network to your client computer, there needs to be a certain protocol, a certain contract. How can they communicate? How can the data be sent? And that's why we have JSON. So JSON is a JavaScript object notation. So it's just a way to pass the data around from client to server and from server to client. And it's defined as key value pairs. So their values made up of simple values, objects, and arrays. So think of it as a contract of how can you send a lot of data from client to server and vice versa, because it can only be a string. So because it can be a string, you need to shape it in a certain way, and this is essentially how it looks. So that's essentially the core pieces of the backend you should be aware of. And then we talk about the front end. So front end, you can think of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript literally as a front-end anatomy. So HTML is your core, CSS is making things look good, and then JavaScript is actually giving it functionality. So HTML is your skeleton, essentially. It's defining the structure of your website. JavaScript, as we mentioned, think of it, it gives you a function, so muscles in your hand. So JavaScript is responsible for you being able to scroll, being able to click the button, being able to do any sort of action on your website. And then you have CSS, which is making things look pretty, giving it colors, giving it alignment, and stuff like that. And then we can also talk about HTTP, AJAX, and JSON. So HTTP, as I mentioned a bit earlier, is a protocol, which essentially defines a contract of how your client and server could communicate. And then you have JSON, which I just talked about earlier as well, which is how your client is going to know how your response data is shaped. So whenever you return back a JSON response, you always know that it's an object which has key value pairs, and every value inside can be another object, as the example is here, which again has key value pairs, and then you know how to manipulate your data. Then some of the tools we have, which we're going to be using today, are Node.js and Express. So Node is runtime environment, which includes pretty much everything you need to execute a program written in JavaScript. Express is a minimal and flexible Node.js web application framework, which provides a robust set of features for your mobile and your web applications. So if you're not sure what exactly the framework is, you've probably also heard a million times, but maybe you're not sure when is something a framework, when it isn't. So think of it as a source for common code bases. So if you would be writing something without a framework, you would probably still have some common code pieces, which are then just good to be reused, and you would have popular solutions, popular ways how to do something, how to implement something. So framework is just extracting all of these, and then you can use it, and you don't have to redo a bunch of stuff from scratch. So yeah, it also includes some recommended solutions and some best practices. What other tools do we use? So we use Git and GitHub. What is the difference between them? So Git is essentially a distributed version control system to track your code changes. So some of the commands used there are push, pull, add, commit, fork, and so much more. So Git helps versioning the code in a way that multiple people could work together on the same code base. And it serves the tracking progress over time. You have something like checkpoints. You see at any point what changed, who changed it, when did the change happen, and why did the change happen, because the person also needs to put a comment, why did they add the change. So it's literally like a history of everything that happened. And then GitHub is a web-based repository. It's a web-based Git repository hosting service. It's essentially the most popular one. You can use GitHub to share code, to also contribute to other people's projects, because there is a lot of open source projects which you can join as a contributor. So yeah, it's a place where you can put your code for easy access to your portfolio. Then another thing we will be using today is a terminal. So terminal is pretty much a very basic way to communicate with your applications. So it just gives you a text interface. You don't, you can't click on something nicely. For example, you can't click nicely and create a new file or a new folder, but you can write a command, and that command is going to essentially do the same thing. So we will be using terminal today to run and deploy our apps, as well as to use Git. So we're going to be writing Git commands inside of the terminal. And then finally, we have an editor. This is just where you edit your code. You can use many different things. The ones we would probably recommend the most are Visual Studio, Sublime, and Atom. So that's it pretty much. We can now move back to the core, so the core programming part here, the core practical part. And this time we're going to go step by step and program with you. And we hope that you have your local host running and set up from the first part we went through. If you don't, try to go back to that tutorial we've sent you in a chat. If you have any questions, again, please do ask in a chat, or do just unmute yourself, raise a hand and ask something. Or if you don't get a chance to ask a question as we go, then definitely reach out to Steph later and you can send us over any questions you're going to have, and then we can follow back and help you. So yeah, getting over to Jujo.
Cool, so I'll just share my screen again. Cool, so on the same page, we were at step 10, where we need to link our GitHub repo to Heroku, so that every time we push our changes up to GitHub, it'll automatically be deployed on Heroku. So if you go to your app, which I have here, and you go to the deploy tab, you should see that under deployment method you have GitHub. It should say connect to GitHub or something like that, but I've already connected. So once you click that, you should be able to search for your repo somewhere here. There should be a text box. So if you just type the name of your repo, base web app, and press search, it should come up. And you might have to log in first, I'm not sure, to GitHub, but yeah. So once you have that, you should click automatic GitHub deploys. What's it called? Enable automatic deploys somewhere here, so that every time you push the master or you merge into master, it'll automatically deploy online. And once everything's all connected, we can actually view our web app. So if you go back to the checkout page. I'll just stop running my local app. And if I type Heroku open, it'll take me to the live version of my app. So in this case, if you share the link with anyone in the world, they'll be able to see your app. So that's just the last part that we had to get through for this basic setup. Yeah, this part is just making changes, which we will do in the second part. So once everyone's at that step, we'll just hop on to the personal website, which is just the link down there I just clicked on. And today we'll be making a personal web app where you can talk a bit about yourself on your website. You have like an about page, a projects page. You can use it as a blog, and then once you deploy it to Heroku, you can share that link with your friends or anyone. Put on your resume, and they'll be able to see as well. You might want to buy a domain so that you don't have the Heroku app domain URL, but we won't be covering that today. So I'll be going through this part with you. So you don't have to clone this because we'll just be making changes to our existing app. So I'll just open up my project here. And actually, I'll just make this smaller. And I'll have this on the other side. Cool. So we kind of go through the structure here actually. So we have a start.js, which you kind of put all your config in there and all your routing. So for example, for the config, you can see that this is the port that I'll be running on. And as for routing, you can see that if the request asking for the root page, then we'll render this page, which is under pages index, which is here. So you can see this yo-yo web so cool, testing a little HTML file, and yes, that's our main page here. So, well, right now it's slightly boring apart from this. There's not much on here, so we'll add a few pages. So let's add an about page. So if you go to pages and click create a new file, I'll just call it about.ejs. And we'll just quickly print something so that we know it's working. So about. So once I have that saved, I need to add routing so that whenever, so I can actually go to that page. So I'm just going to copy it from here because it's already here. So if we go to the URL and then we put slash about at the end, it'll take us to our about page that we just created here. So I'll just save this as well and hop back into my terminal, and I will do Heroku local web to run it locally. Yeah, so it's running on port 5000. So if I go back to, okay, not this one, localhost colon 5000, and I refresh. Actually, I need to go to about. Then we can see that I have my app here that I just created here. So that's working. You can go ahead and add more pages. Actually, I'll just do that as well. Project, EJS, and contact EJS. And I'll just copy the routing as well. Cool. So if you save and rerun your local web server, you should be able to see the changes there. Next, we'll make it look slightly, we'll make it more functional, because right now, if you want to go to another page, you're going to have to type /about or /projects, and you can't just click from your main page to go to that page you just created. So we're at a nav bar, which we already have here. So the code is here, and we'll just copy it. So if you click on draw, then you can have the raw code here, which I can just copy. If you copy straight from GitHub, like it'll give you like weird line numbers and stuff, I think. So if we go back to our project and we go to helpers, and we can see that there's already a head helper. So this is the head section of your HTML file. So it has all your kind of how do I describe it? So you could have your description here, your title, just kind of the metadata for your website, and you can import all the CSS and all your JavaScript files that you need, so that it'll run when you start your web server. When you go on the website. So we'll just go and create another helper. So let's call it navbar. And the good thing about creating helpers here is that it makes your code more modular. So you can just use your navbar helper anywhere in your other files. You don't have this code everywhere all the time, which makes it more messier. So just paste the code in here. I'll fix the indent. So should probably use two. Cool. So all right, let's save this, and now we can add this header, navbar that we just created to other pages that we have. So if we go to about, we can have, so I'm just gonna copy the template here over from index, so that's our main page, just so I don't have to type it all out, but I'll go through what I just copied. So, well, we have the HTML tag here, so that, which shows that this is an HTML file, and then we need a head section, and here we're including the head helper, so all the imports and stuff, and we'll just add another one here for navbar. So include helpers navbar. And then we have our body section, which is where all the content goes. So this is what we have on the main page. We don't want that, which is we'll just put something here. So, oops, auto-completed for me, great. So hi, Yujiro, can't spell my own name. Yujiro, I'm a backend dev at HubSpot. Cool, save this. And before we go and see what this looks like, we'll add a little bit more CSS so that the pages look prettier. Right now, if you go on it, it's gonna look pretty bare. So if you just click scroll here again, because there's quite a bit of code to take through, copy that. And we'll head over to the CSS folder, main of CSS. We can replace everything that's already in here because they're also in here. So if we just replace it, hit save. Let's go back to our repo. And let's have a look on our local server. So just run it again. Fingers crossed it works. So let's go back to our main page. All right, so that's not what it should look like, I think. So what did I save? Next. Oh yeah, I forgot to add the navbar. Rookie mistake. So if we go back to about, here's the navbar. We need that on every page because so we can navigate to it. So I've just added it to index there. I'll just copy the template so that I have it on every page. Just make this different. Projects. Contact. Cool, save everything. And restart my server. So, all right. So now we can see that we have our nav bar here, and if we click on it, we can see that it goes to all the pages that we created earlier, and you can see how that works. If we go to navbar EJS, we can see that if we click on this link, which says about, then it'll take us to the /about page. And that's about it for the basic part. Before we move on, I'll just quickly show GitHub how Git works. So if we do git status, we can see all the changes that we have made. So we can see that we changed our main CSS file, we changes to these files to add routing and to add navbar, and then we have all these new pages and of course our navbar file. So I'll just do one commit to make it easier. So if I do git add dot, then that adds everything, all the files to the Git staging environment. So we can see that they're all ready to be committed. And we can do git commit -m for message, I think. So then you can add a little message comment. So I'll just say add navbar for simplicity. Normally you try to make it as you want smaller commits so that all your commit titles can describe exactly what you changed. And if you need more detail, you can, instead of putting -m, which is a shortcut, you can remove this. It'll take you to your terminal editor, and you can add more details there. But for now, we'll just do this. And then git push. And this will push up to our master branch on our repo. Normally you don't want to push up to your master, you want to create a new branch and push that up. And then once you're on GitHub, you can create a pull request and have someone review your branch code before you merge it in. That way you don't just break your master branch, which is actually your production branch, accidentally. So because we set up automatically deploys here, if we just refresh this, which is my live version, you can see that our changes are up here. So it's not the most visually appealing app right now, but you can make all your changes in your project. Make it prettier and add more content. So yeah, hopefully this gave you a little introduction, and now you kind of have a starting point to how to create your own web app. So you can keep working on this to make it nicer, make it actually your own, or you can use Express and Node and create a new project, use Heroku to, make some other web apps, for anything that you want. And then you can put them on your resume. Companies really like that, so it's very good. Yeah, so that's about it. If you have any questions, please put in the chat. I can't see the chat right now because I'm sharing, so I don't know if there are any questions, but if you want us to go through anything again, or something's not clear, or yeah, feel free to ask there.
Awesome. So I'm gonna just share my screen a little bit more to show you the potential really of this application and how can you add a lot more stuff to make it look yours and to make it look better. So I hope you can see my screen here. So this is a link we were earlier on. So at the top here, you have a link to our sort of finished, or you can call it half finished application, because it's never fully finished. You can always continue adding stuff to there. So if we have a look at that, this is how it looks. So this is essentially coming from the same base structure we were just showing you here. And you can see that it has the same navbar. But now you can see, how much other stuff this one actually has. It has the link back to the repository. It has some sort of a iframe here. And then if you go to about, this is a page so you can create something nice like this. Put a little bit of information about yourself, and you can use this to link it on your CV and to show it to potential employers, because this is a really nice thing to have. Then this is maybe a list of things you worked on, contact details. So this really, just here to show you this even has the links to social networks. So this is really here to show you the potential of what all the things you can add here to make it your own. Add your own project, add your own descriptions of your project, add even more pages, add even more routing, style it to look prettier. So you can also, at the very bottom of this page here on the repository, you had a link to available Bootstrap components, which is a really good thing if you want to explore more how to make something just look better and prettier. So if you click on that, you can really explore this library, and you can see how many different things it's going to provide for you. So you don't need to write all the CSS from scratch. You can really use this. And for example, if you copy paste something as simple as this, it's going to provide you CSS, which is going to make look something really pretty, essentially. And it's everything is going to be sort of uniform. So you see that all the colors are really uniform and they all really match each other nicely. So we would really suggest take your time, go through the recording of this once again, because it was maybe a little bit hard to follow because we're not in a classroom, we are on Zoom, and we weren't able to, you know, to come to you and to see if you have any questions or help you out if you had any errors or something. So take your time, go through the recording of this workshop again, go through all the steps you had here in the base web app, and yeah, try to make it your own and try to use some of the Bootstrap components. So I think that's all we had. Does anyone have any questions now at the end? Okay, so thanks very much, everyone, for attending once again. And I really hope that you're gonna do something nice out of this afterwards. All right. Thank you all.